Hello and welcome to the Q Radio City Beat Election 2015 debate. It's the only broadcast debate with all 8 of the main parties represented. We're in this wonderful facility at the Ulster University Coleraine campus, so thank you to them for providing that. But let me introduce our panel. With us today we have Jim Allister of the TUV. We've Stephen Farry of the Alliance Party. We've Mike Nesbitt of the Ulster Unionist Party, Declan Kearney of Sinn Féin. We have Gregory Campbell of the DUP, David McNary of UKIP, Stephen Agnew of the Green Party, and Mark Durkin of the SDLP. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel. Now, the format is very simple. We have random questions selected from members of the audience. We will step through those questions, but you're welcome to join in at any stage. Conducting things on the floor today for us today is Bob Huggins. Bob, take us to our first question.
Thank you, Jim. Our first question is to the Green Party and UKIP. With hate crime so high here, is a multicultural society in Northern Ireland working?
Stephen Agnew.
I think the Green Party takes a positive approach to immigration and would recognise the valuable contribution that people coming into this country have made. There's a myth that surrounds that the pressure on our public services are somehow due to immigration. Well, the reality is that in Northern Ireland we have more people who leave our shores than come in. If that rhetoric were true, we'd have the best health system in the world. The reality is our health service and our housing situation is bad because we're not investing sufficiently in our public services. The austerity cuts have affected badly our public services and delivery to service users. And the Green Party wishes to kind of challenge this myth and recognise the valuable contribution. The reality is the health service that we rely on would collapse if it wasn't for the valued work of nurses and doctors who come from overseas.
But I suppose the question was, is it working? Is the multi-ethnic society working?
I think, unfortunately, where we find poverty, we find tensions. And I think where we have a better resourced public sector, because you have to remember that austerity is a political choice, not an economic necessity. If we choose to invest in our society, if we choose to invest in our public services, then we get better outcomes for people and we get less community tensions. The problem is poverty. The problem is not multiculturalism.
David McNary, UKIP, you don't seem to think it's working.
Well, let me speak for myself, if you don't mind.
Well, you have a problem with the level of immigration, so therefore you seem to have issues with the multicolour society.
Let me just say what I want to say rather than you trying to put words in my mouth. UKIP are a non-sectarian, non-racist, multicultural membership party, and we benefit immensely from being that right across the whole of the United Kingdom. The question about racist attacks shouldn't happen anywhere. And we condemn them happening, certainly when we see them in Northern Ireland. My closest constituency to my Strangford constituency is East Belfast. And I've seen things happening there because I'm born in East Belfast that frankly I just find disgraceful. We've got to put it into context as well. It's not a major problem in Northern Ireland, and let's keep it that way. We don't want to see racism grow in any manner whatsoever.
Is it not a major problem? The statistics not suggest that, to some extent, Belfast at times has seemed to be the hate capital of Europe.
Well, I haven't seen those statistics. I don't recognise them either. I think that it's incumbent upon all political leaders to ensure that there is no space, no room for racism or racist attacks whatsoever in Northern Ireland, and the more we say it, then the more we keep it free from our streets and our communities. There have been incidents, and the right and proper thing to do is to condemn them. They're not right at all.
Let me bring in Declan Kearney, Sinn Féin.
I don't accept that we're at that point yet where we have a multicultural society. The ambivalence of some of the parties in the panel, however, has made a net contribution to the rise of hate attitudes which has caused the type of violence being inflicted upon ethnic minorities within our society.
Ambivalence by some of the parties. Who are you talking about?
If we're to actually build a shared future in this part of the island, which is truly multicultural, then we need to recognise that those who have come from other places, those who are of diverse ethnic origins, who have come into our society to work and to make a contribution, they play an invaluable role within this society. But what we have to do is to ensure in a society that they're made to feel welcome, so that the dream of a multicultural and shared society is in fact realised.
You've said, just specifically on that point, Declan Kearney, you said some of the parties here have been ambivalent towards this. Who are you talking about?
I haven't heard every single party around the room this afternoon come out unequivocally and unambiguously to condemn hate crime when it has arisen, whether that's in the form of racial attack or sectarian attack and abuse.
Anybody?
There needs to be a zero-sum attitude taken to both sectarianism and racism and racial attacks.
I must say, this is pretty rich. This is pretty rich coming from Sinn Féin, the party that justified the murder, the genocidal murder of people in our country for decades, now holding themselves forth as the great white hope in respect of condemning racism and other things. The very basis of the IRA campaign was racist. It was Brits out. So these are the last people that one we should be impressed with.
Well, Mike Nesbitt, you wanted to come in too.
But yes, there is an important issue, and race crime is wrong, but it takes us to an underlying fundamental issue. The right of a nation state to control their own borders and their own immigration policy. And the problem is we've surrendered that to Brussels, and unless and until we recover it, then this is something incapable of this nation as a nation state addressing.
The question, just to remind us, Mike Nesbitt, was, is the multicolour society in Northern Ireland working?
I think it is. To some extent, the hate crimes quite rightly get a very high media profile, but I think they're carried out by a relatively small minority of people. I'll give you two examples of where I think it is working. If you go up, for example, to Belfast Islamic Centre, up in South Belfast on any given night, a large number of the people you'll meet there are hospital consultants, and without them our NHS would be potentially in crisis.
But at different times they've had to have police support outside
and that's
to protect
wrong,
them
and
from
we should have zero tolerance of that. At the other end of the scale, if you go to some hard manual labour, particularly in agri-food, those people will tell you our businesses would not survive without that labour because the indigenous labour simply do not want to do it. In terms of the shared future, some people think to achieve that we have to give up something of ourselves. I don't believe that. We don't have to jump in to a virtual blender and come out the human form of beige. Declan should remain a very proud Republican, trying to persuade, not should have bombed me into a united Ireland, but trying to persuade me, and I remain as a very proud unionist, and our ethnic minorities should be proudly within the mix.
Okay, let me get the last two parties in, or three parties in on this. Stephen Farry, is it working?
Well, we are building a multicultural and shared society, but there's still a journey to be made in that regard. And moreover, we must make that journey. It's vital to the health of our society, and it's also vital to our economy that we're able to attract people from other parts of the world to live here and also to invest here. So it's important we understand that. Also, we have to get beyond rhetoric and talk about action. Locally, the executive has to publish the racial equality strategy. This is now an imperative. But also bearing in mind this is a Westminster election, there's a very clear choice here. We have some parties who are arguing for a more closed approach to immigration. That will be disastrous for our economy locally and our society. We need to be open to the rest of the world.
Rather than the rhetoric you're talking about,
let's talk about actually having a regional approach to immigration.
Spell out the
Okay, let us speak. David McDowell.
The policies of the Conservative Party and indeed UKIP are not in the interest of the Northern Ireland economy. They're seeking to restrict immigration. We're sitting here in a university. We need to be attracting students from elsewhere in the world. And after those students graduate, we want them to stay here and to invest under the policy being pursued by the Conservatives and UKIP. They're going to be asked to leave our country.
No heckling. David McNally, no heckling, please. Gregory Campbell.
He's the Minister of Cuts and he's sitting there saying, we need to attract students. What is the audience meant to think of that? Just cutting the tribe out of the university.
The rest of the world.
Stick to the key question, which is relation to our multi-ethnic society. Gregory Campbell, your party too would like to see tighter controls on immigration.
Yeah, well, let's look at the multicultural makeup of Northern Ireland. It is becoming more so, and this election is a Westminster election, and the government that's formed in the days or weeks after the 8th of May will decide the nature of the entire nation state in terms of its multicultural makeup, in terms of who comes in, where they're from. But you know, I think it's the height of irony that this issue is raised by a representative of Sinn Féin. You know, to wax eloquent about tolerance whenever we've had 3 decades of the worst intolerance. But you know, thankfully those days are passing. And they're gone. Let's keep on the right way, and let's decide after the dust has settled on the 8th of May, whenever the composition of the new government becomes clear, parties here, MPs here can play a role in a constructive approach to how Northern Ireland's make-up takes us forward to prosperity for everybody here.
Okay, anybody in the audience have any views on this at this stage? Yes, just a lady up there.
It's a bit of a wider point, I think, but a visitor to these shores, looking at the representatives before us today, would think that this country is peopled by white, forgive me, Stephen, like you, middle-aged men.
Yeah, well, it's certainly... I don't think, in all honesty, and for listeners at home, yes, it is an entirely male panel. That is, the parties chose who they sent today, and perhaps there is a predominance of men in politics. But in terms of the fact, the colour of our skin, Mark Durkan, are we seeing a more multicolour society in Northern Ireland? Is it working? That was what the question was.
Well, I don't think we're anywhere near there yet. It's something that we have to keep working at, just as we have to keep working at making sure that we are a more united, cohesive society in terms of our own differences here as between communities and traditions and political outlooks. So too we have to work harder at being a fuller, more balanced society in terms of racial differences as well, and not just racial differences in terms of different colours and different identities, but also the religio-racial mix as well, because an awful lot of the tensions and the prejudices that are being expressed and sometimes all too easily coming out in the media and the scaremongering around particular religio-racial groups is something that seems to activate particular prejudices here and then surfaces in some of the evidence of hate crimes that we do have here. So we do have to keep working at it. That's why we need to see the strategies here coming forward at the devolved level. That's why the new local councils need to be doing more than the smaller, less powerful councils were able to do before that. So it's something that needs to really come into the whole community planning agenda in a very proactive way, not just in response to particular incidents when they happen. And also at the level of Westminster, it means that you need MPs from Northern Ireland who are going to stand up when there are aggressive immigration policies that are being used purely for vote pandering within British party politics. When you get moves, say, to say, oh, we're going to do a targeted reduction, we're putting a cap on the number of immigrants, regardless of the particular needs or circumstances, and it's going to affect students as well. We're taking students in simply so that we can get that number hitting universities and higher education just in pursuit of a target, purely for political presentational points of view. That needs people to stand up to that.
They'll have a chance to vote, of course, in the coming election on those issues. Let's go back to our audience now with another question. And Bob, over to you.
Okay, our next question is from Philip. Philip, your question is to the SDLP and TUB. Tell us a little about yourself and what's your question?
I'm Philip Campbell. I'm a minister of one of the churches in Coleraine and one of the chaplains here at the university. I was wondering if the members of the panel would agree on the importance of giving clear leadership, not least to students at universities like this, on the big moral questions of the day, such as same-sex marriage and abortion.
Now, that question was directed initially, I think, Philip, at the SDLP. Mark Durkan, did your party give clear guidance on, for instance, the same-sex marriage issue when 5 of your members failed to turn up to the Assembly vote?
Well, first of all, we have a very clear policy line in relation to the legalisation of same-sex marriage, and that's why, as a Westminster MP, I voted for the same-sex marriage bill. In fact, I think I'm the only Northern Ireland MP that voted for it at both the second and third reading. Naomi Long voted for the second reading, but not the third reading. I also was there to participate in all the debates on all of the amendments. So, to that extent, I was showing diligence as a legislator. I know that my views didn't rhyme with many of my constituents who wrote to me very sincerely, and I wrote back to them very sincerely, respecting the points that they were making, but making it very clear that the legislation that we were passing was legislation that was going to fully respect the positions of churches. Churches were not going to have this legislation imposed on them as far as the integrity of their own sacraments were concerned. Also, their right to teach their view of marriage was going to be protected, not just in the pulpit, but in the public square as well. So that's clear, sensible leadership. In terms of the vote on Monday in the Assembly, which was a resolution about the principle of same-sex marriage, yes, I'm disappointed that more MLAs were not there from all parties. I'm disappointed it wasn't passed. But I also recognise that what we need to do in this is have actual legislation, because I know that the debate moved forward in the context of Westminster when people were faced with the actual legislation. And that's what we need to do, confront the actual legislation. And so in terms of the ideas around referendums or whatever, which I have no objection to, but I do recognise that there's been referendums on issues in the South. The legislation was to follow and hasn't come, so the legislative process has its own requirements. And in relation to abortion, that's another issue in the context of Westminster. Both abortion and same-sex marriage were left as free votes. So while parties, even the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, have their policies on abortion and they have their policies on same-sex marriage, all of their members were allowed free votes. That included ministers and shadow ministers as well.
Let me bring in Gregory Campbell.
But to vote against.
Gregory Campbell, DUP. Do you offer clear leadership on these issues?
Yes, I think we do. I think some of these moral issues can become exceptionally emotive, whether they are abortion, end-of-life issues, same-sex marriage. They can become exceptionally emotive. And I think it's in nobody's interest to allow that to then escalate to the point where it gets highly polarised and people find themselves in opposite camps to the point where the actual analysis of the problem and how we work our way through the problem gets left to one side. I'll give you an example of that. The debate took place the other day in the Assembly. I heard on the radio after the debate from an activist, an LGBT activist, who said that she was in the debate and she was appalled that every time a Sinn Féin spokesperson spoke on the debate, they were hissed at and booed by the benches of the DUP. And that didn't happen.
Okay,
that
but
did not happen.
Okay, but let's stick to the issue, though. Let's stick to the issue.
Well, that is a simple
on that
part of the
issue, if
issue.
you're offering clear leadership, what is your leadership in relation to equal marriage for gay people?
We're opposed to same-sex marriage,
And
as we voted
down the line. For what reason, though?
What's happened on 4 occasions?
What's the reason for that position?
Well,
is it because you believe that children growing up in such a relationship are more likely to be abused? Is that the reason? Or what is the reason?
Well, you see, that reference that you made was used by one of our members who immediately clarified it, apologised for it, and resigned from his post because of it.
Okay, but so what is the reason then?
Well, the reason is because we believe that marriage as an institution is between one man and one woman. That's what we think. That is not to negate any other relationship that people might choose to have. And they are free to do that. But the institution of marriage, we believe, is between one man and one woman. And we should, I mean, society is evolving, but we've got to try and debate and discuss these issues in a manner where the truth is given and delivered, and people's strongly held views aren't then castigated, and that's part of the problem. Sometimes some of us that have beliefs and views, we are then castigated as in some way being homophobes or hate crime filled.
The point is, Gregory, they're your beliefs and your party's beliefs.
Yes, and we're not applying them to anyone else.
Well, you are.
No, we're not.
By not allowing
people
who of same-sex relationships to get married, you're saying it's our belief and it will be your law. And the point is, we're there to legislate for the whole of society, not just those who agree with your beliefs, but those who disagree. And the point is about choice, whether it's on abortion or whether it's same-sex marriage. I believe there should be a separation between church and state. It is not for the state to impose its moral values on the society. It is for people to make those choices for themselves. And if a couple in a loving relationship wish to get married, their gender should be irrelevant. What's relevant is their love and their commitment.
Okay,
there's nothing.
Declan,
and there is nothing preventing those couples to have the relationship that they currently have.
Okay, Declan Kearney, you think this issue should be put to a referendum, specifically that of same-sex marriage?
Yeah. Gay people are our family. They're members of our family. They're our friends. They're our neighbours. There are gay people in this audience, some of whom are out, some of whom are not out. Those who are not out haven't come out perhaps because they don't feel that we live in an inclusive enough society that would respect their rights to love those with whom they wish to have relationships. And there are members of the gay community, I am sure, within the DUP. Now, to come back to Philip's question, there are...
You've just put that thought in the audience's mind.
Yes.
They're trying to work out who you're talking about.
To come back to Philip's point,
I don't know why it should be surprising.
Institutions such as universities need to be seats of learning to equip young people, the future leaders of our society, with as much information, perspective, worldly experience in order to make reasoned and wise decisions for our society in the future.
Okay, I think
if I can finish on this point,
very briefly.
Gay people are discriminated in our society, and that's an obscenity. So rather than simply focus on the rhetoric and how we can, with cliche, change those circumstances, we need to do practical things. And the idea of marriage equality is a totemic way that we can prove in our society that gay people are here to be welcomed, loved and included in our society.
Okay.
That's why a referendum would be very helpful, because the men sitting around this table this afternoon, I don't believe, are entirely representative of the values, the attitudes and the aspirations of our society. Let the people have their say.
All right. Well, let me just go back.
Would he restrict that referendum to only the gay issue?
No,
what about a referendum?
Okay,
what about a referendum
let me hear from our
on the
questioner.
status of the national flag of Northern
right.
Ireland as part of the UK?
Let
Or maybe that's a different issue.
No,
maybe people wouldn't sign up to that referendum and say, I'll abide by that. Or we could have a range of other
have a range
issues.
of issues, but we want to talk about this one because Philip asked
yes.
the question in terms of moral leadership. I want to come to the other parties who haven't spoken yet, but from what you've heard, are you getting the leadership that you want, and where does that lie?
Not particularly, Jim, I have to say. As a Christian minister, I take a Christian position on those issues of marriage being between one man and one woman, and abortion being something which is it's abhorrent because of the fact that it's taking of a human life. Do you think the politicians are confused on these issues? Because we've heard fairly strong views either side, so perhaps they're offering leadership in their own way. I think we get too mixed up talking about rights that we miss right and wrong.
Okay.
That's my view.
Stephen Farry, Alliance would generally support this, but again, some of your members abstained on the issue of same-sex marriage. Are you in that sort of woolly zone that doesn't offer the leadership that some were seeking?
Well, we're not woolly on this issue at all. We're very clear. We have a clear party policy, which is 100% support of equal marriage. Some of our members and elected representatives are on a journey, and we're working with them to convince them of the arguments, as indeed we're seeking to convince others in society of the rightness of that argument. Let me also be clear, particularly in response to the comments that were made from the audience, there isn't a single Christian view on these issues. Christianity itself, like many world religions, is diverse, and each individual will have their own perspective as to how they apply their faith to the world. So it's a bit of a misnomer to talk about the Christian view and to judge people whether they are 100% in agreement with that or somehow failing. We also have to understand that everyone will have their own individual moral framework, their own ethical framework, and it's not for the state to legislate for that. It's to facilitate people having their choice around how they will actually live and run their own lives. Let's create the space for that to happen. One final thing I would say, Jim, this notion of a referendum is a little bit tantalising in some respects. We're actually trying to get traction on this issue, but there's a danger in this, because the issue of people's rights in society is not something to be bargained for or in the gift of a majority vote. Rights are something that people have automatically, and it's up to the Assembly and indeed perhaps the courts to actually recognise what is the reality of people's rights with respect to marriage, not for the majority to somehow gift it through the means of a referendum.
But as the situation stands at the moment, there is no right to equal marriage for gay people
Well, we have this anomaly where people can enter into a same-sex marriage in other parts of the UK and indeed other parts of the world, but whenever they come to Northern Ireland, it's not recognised. And that's the particular crux around which I think this will be legally challenged, and perhaps successfully.
Could I say, and I think this question was directed at TV, so I think I am entitled maybe to have some say. I find it quite condescending from the Alliance Party to talk about people being on a journey, as if they are absolutely right on this issue and everyone in time must come round to their view. And to talk about rights, let's be very clear. There is no such thing as a human right to same-sex marriage. The European Convention of Human Rights is very clear. Article 12, there is a right to marriage. There is no right to same-sex marriage. And so Article 12 recognises the right of each state to define marriage as they choose.
And that was just
and
they, 1948.
Yes,
not
and
the
even the
today.
most adventurous of the, even given the aggressive, adventurous nature of the European Court of Human Rights, they have never been able to advance that. So it is down to each nation state to define marriage. In the UK terms, because it's a devolved issue, that means it's down to Stormont to define marriage. And this whole debate is about redefining marriage. And I must say, one is fundamentally entitled to hold to the view, as I hold, that marriage is between one man and one woman. I don't think any public representative should park their moral views at the door of the Assembly and simply vote differently.
Why does the perhaps legislation or acceptance of marriage among same-sex couples offend you as someone who believes that marriage should be between heterosexual couples?
Because it's a perversion of marriage. It's a redefining of marriage. Marriage, for a very good purpose, is the union of one man and one woman.
What is that purpose?
Because biologically, only a man and a woman can procreate and produce and populate this planet, and that is the reason why. That is the reason why a marriage is between a man and a woman, because of that natural, progressive, biological link. And to say anything else is to pervert and redefine marriage. Now, we have in this country the provision of civil partnerships, which more than legally meets the provision for those of that particular orientation. But why this obsessive need to have marriage? Someone said, a very important point. Stephen said, anyone who's in love should be able to marry. Well, let's think of the logic of that.
No, I said
okay, so let's think of the logic of that. Two men say they love each other, therefore they should marry. A man says, I love two women, therefore should he be able to be in a polygamous marriage? That's where this is taking us. Once you redefine it apart from it, and that's where it's going in Holland.
Is it? Okay.
So the logic that says, that says that marriage is based upon the right because you love someone, then the logic of that is, let's go for polygamous marriage. Why do we not do that? The basic moral.
Mike Nesbitt, you've been sitting patiently there. But is your party offering leadership on this issue?
I think so. On the drive up, I was listening to a debate about same-sex marriage on another radio station. One of the contributors is a colleague of mine, Jeff Dudgeon. He's a unionist councillor. He's openly gay. In fact, he took the old Northern Ireland government to the European courts to secure rights for the gay community. Interesting enough, he does not support same-sex marriage. To my point of view, there's no difference between a man committing to a woman or two men committing to each other or two women committing to each other. Some relationships will work very well, some won't get through. The only difference is in the title. For some, it's a civil partnership. If it's a man and woman, it's a marriage, and I believe that is because it is a religious sacrament. But beyond that, there should be no question of inequality. And what I believe in...
By very definition, that's discrimination. You're discriminating between...
it's a religious sacrament.
But it is also illegal.
Civil marriage is not a religious sacrament.
No,
marriage is not a religious sacrament.
Marriage is a religious sacrament.
But there is a civil part to accept that. There's a key civil part.
I am being asked my view on this.
You're entitled to your view, not you're entitled to a different set of facts, Mike.
I'm entitled to a view, and I'm giving my view, and I don't think there should be any discrimination against people who want to live and thrive in a same-sex relationship.
Okay,
The
but just don't call it marriage.
The
Just don't
question
call it marriage.
was about leadership. The Ulster Unionist Party give people a free vote on conscience, on all these matters of abortion, euthanasia, same-sex marriage, but we expect them to do it from a knowledge base. And therefore, sir, I throw it to a certain extent back to you in this institution and schools and universities to make sure people have the knowledge to make an informed decision.
All right, we'll have to park it there. Interesting issue though it is. Bob, take us to our next question.
Okay, the next question is from Shane Patton. Shane, tell me a little about yourself and what's your question and do?
I am currently a politics and criminology student at Jordanstown, and my question is towards the DUP. Would Sinn Féin consider taking their seats in Westminster, considering the constitutional success of the SNP?
So, would Sinn Féin consider taking their seats, considering the success of the SNP? Declan Kearney, ever?
No, because when you look at the scale of change and transformation that's been effected in our society over the course of the last 16, 17 to 20 years, at every point in time where we have successfully brought about levers for change, the Good Friday Agreement, where we've transferred the powers for policing and justice, where collectively all of the parties stood up and faced down David Cameron's attempt to drive more of the austerity agenda down our throat back in December, then the changes were effected as a result of the pressure that we brought to bear from here.
Okay, so voting for you for Westminster is not relevant then because Westminster's irrelevant, you've just said.
It's absolutely relevant because this is a decisive election. And in this electoral contest, we have a choice between austerity and equality. And what we are...
People also have a choice between representatives who take their seat and those who don't. And you...
Of course. And
so just to be clear, though, on the answer, you did say no. It was pretty clear. Is that never?
None of the parties who take their seats at Westminster have successfully resisted any of the cuts that we are now living with in this society. Every progressive change that we have seen, politically or otherwise, in this society has been effected as a result of the critical mass and the political strength of parties here in this side of the island who have then managed to exert through negotiation change and influence on a British
Mark Durkan, the SLP obviously...
We don't need Parliament, let's just have anarchy.
Let me bring the SLP in. Of course, another nationalist party who do take their seats. Why do you think Sinn Féin are wrong?
Well, I think it's been shown over the whole history of the peace process that the best predictor of a future Sinn Féin position is a current SDLP one that Sinn Féin attack. So just about every other thing the SDLP have done and stood for in the past, including new beginning to policing, the whole set of devolution, or the whole scheme that's in the agreement, Sinn Féin have moved on, and they may well move on this as well.
Let me just clarify that again.
He said no.
Is that a never?
Yes.
Yes, that's a never.
And just to make the point,
some other Sinn Féin representatives had never say never.
Mark can say whatever he wants, but the reality is that when the SDLP stopped negotiating, Sinn Féin continued to negotiate and brought about the change that we actually enjoy.
So,
let's clear a bit.
Sorry.
Let me bring Gregory Campbell in. Who, again, you're touting yourselves in this election.
Into this meeting to get speaking. I mean, it seemed I should have come in.
You have been speaking on this in this debate, and we'll bring you back in a moment.
Thanks
Gregory Campbell. Your party are touting yourselves in this election as people who could hold the balance of power. So obviously you do believe in taking your seats.
Well, let's look at this. And there are two fundamental questions that have to be directed at Sinn Féin. It looks as if this could be a hung parliament. Therefore, any body of MPs that are present in the House from Northern Ireland could have significant influence and could have significant benefit to everybody in this room and everyone listening on the radio. Now, and that's just a factual position, irrespective of the outcome in terms of who wins what seat. But Sinn Féin have said, for example, welfare reform and other issues, absolute red line issues, will not move. Absolutely down the line, this is a do or die, will die in the ditch issue, not to use a pun on Sinn Féin. Now, if they say that, and we come to a hung parliament, and there is a vote that could be decided by 2 or 3 votes, and one of the votes is welfare reform, and they are saying our absence will mean a worse position for Northern Ireland. They're still saying we're still not going. Even though we have a red line this issue of welfare reform, we're not for moving, and they could make some change. They're saying we're not going to make it because we're not taking the seats. They've got to address that. They can't be allowed to get away in the smoke. The second thing is the issue that Mark Durkin alluded to, and they've tried to get round this. Michelle Gildernew said on the issue of taking their seats, never say never. Declan Kearney has said never. Now, who's right? Who's telling the truth? They either may take their seats or they'll never take their seats. Now, which is it? Was Michelle Gildernew telling the truth, or are you telling the truth?
Gregory Campbell's party
Which is it?
will not make a whit of difference in Westminster because they never
Can't answer the question.
Nor have any of the other parties who leave this part of the island to take their seats. The reality is that the centre of gravity for bringing about more change in the island in the interest of all of our citizens, nationalists, unionists, loyalists and Republicans, is by using the institutions that we have available to us here and using our political strength to exert more leverage to bring about more change.
Okay, David McNary, you can. David McNary.
Well, I hope you appreciate the irony, and certainly I do. This guy used to say never, never, never all his life.
Yes, to the IRA, and we still do.
This guy is saying never, never, never. Let's talk about the peace process. We wouldn't be here without it. It doesn't belong to the Provost. It doesn't belong to Sinn Féin. It belongs to us all. Because these guys over on my right had to be brought to the table. They didn't come willingly. We've all benefited from that.
What's that got to do with taking your seats at Westminster?
Those benefits are great. If the advancement of taking your seats at Westminster is no, never, but we're going to set up a sweetie shop outside Westminster, and we're going to invite Dave Boyd down, and we're going to negotiate, because that's what they're telling us. We're not taking any pay, but we're going to take all the expenses, we're going to take all the lovely money, and we're going to set up a shop outside where we're going to negotiate. And what are they going to negotiate? Who are they going to negotiate with? They don't need to go into Parliament when the SNP are there, because the SNP are the Scottish version of Sinn Féin. And tell you folks, you've got to believe it, that's where we're heading for. Out of the union, SNP will do their job. They don't need to go in.
So let me bring in anybody in the audience have any views on this about,
the armed wing of the
about
SNP
taking their
is,
seats. Yes, a gentleman here just in the third row. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. We've listened to quite a debate here to date, and the time, I'm sure, is running out. So what I would like to do is to say that all that we've heard this afternoon, one common thing goes a long way here to sort out a lot of the problems, and that is prosperity, not austerity. And we, along with a lot of other farm organisations, have put a case forward for legislation on farm gate prices. I want to know how many of the parties here will give a vow that if they get their MPs elected, that they will go to Westminster and push for legislation on farm gate prices in Northern Ireland, which will give us prosperity off the back of the Roosevelt New Deal proposal that was carried out in America in the 30s and succeeded.
Okay, let me bring in the panel. Mike Nesbitt, obviously the agriculture is vital to our economy. Food that arrives on our table comes from many of the farmers across this region. What's your party going to do for them?
Prosperity is our theme. In our manifesto, I think since I got elected 4 years ago, I've been surprised at the dependency culture within politics, as if the only way to get money is to take a begging bowl over to London. We can generate much more of our own wealth, and we should be doing so. So what we're looking for, if elected, is as many policy levers as possible to help generate more wealth within Northern Ireland. Corporation tax is the key, but there's a whole basket, including some concessionary VAT rates on hospitality and for the construction industry, which will be incredibly helpful. Let's generate some serious wealth for all our people, because if people are more prosperous, they will be healthier, and if they're healthier, they will also be happier. And I think one of the problems with Northern Ireland is that so many people are not happy, including a lot of the people you're looking at on this panel.
Oh, I didn't think we looked that depressed. Okay, thank you for that, Mike Nesbitt. Let's go back to the audience with another question. Bob.
Okay, the next question is from Shane. Shane, tell me a little about yourself. And, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Johnny. It's Johnny. Tell me a little about yourself, but what is your question?
I'm Johnny, and I'm a journalist. Basically, I was just saying, statistics show, well, this question's aimed towards Alliance mainly, and UKIP. Statistics show that young people feel the most disenfranchised from their politicians. Why do you think young people are the least likely to vote, and what are your plans to change this?
Thank you for that. Well, we've already had it mentioned that we're old, middle class and white on this panel. I think Stephen Agnew got a bit of an exemption on the old bit. But Stephen Farry, is that part of the problem? Why are young people turned off politics?
Well, this is a common problem around the Western world, but obviously in certain places it is quite acute. I think quite simply, the traditional approach to politics in Northern Ireland is a big turn-off to a lot of young people. Young people have a different approach. They're breaking away from the traditional labels of unionists and nationalists, or Protestant equals unionist, Catholic equals nationalist. People want to be recognised as to who they are. They want to be part of an outward-looking society and have opportunities. And even just looking at the last question around the farm gate prices, this notion that we would actually want to leave the European Union, particularly with its relevance in terms of CAP and the access to the single market, will be catastrophic to Northern Ireland. So they're looking for a sense of
your nose is growing.
They're looking for a sense of leadership from their politicians. They want to be respected as to who they are. They need to see movement, particularly a lot of the social issues where they feel that a very conservative attitude amongst a number of parties is holding back progress in line with what's happening elsewhere in the world. And if we can address those issues, then we will better motivate young people to engage in politics.
David McNary, the question was also directed at UKIP. Not too many young people in your candidate lineup, is there?
No, unfortunately there's not, and there are no women either. Those are two faults. The young person angle is very intriguing for UKIP. We are the fastest growing party in the United Kingdom, and our numbers of young people are, for me, quite devastating in terms of the growth that there are. And in Northern Ireland, we have over 400 young people attached as members to UKIP. They're vibrant, they're very, very keen, and there are a number of them in this audience, I'm glad to say as well. There are a number of them spread through all the universities. So there's something in what UKIP's doing. I think probably it's refreshing in its approach, UKIP. It's also setting out that, there's an advert comes on the television, I think if we're allowed to say it on radio, maybe not for a product, and it says it does what it says on the tin. I think that's what appeals to the young people. UKIP do what they say in their manifestos.
Okay, well,
they know where we are, and they know where we're getting. There's no absolute bull from us, like you've been hearing from every other person that's been nattering at you here today. You're going to get it straight from UKIP. We know where we are, we know where we're going. And the young people seem to want to go with us, and I'm very, very pleased.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see.
But not if you're a woman cleaning behind the fridge, though.
No. Stephen Agnew.
Yeah, I mean, the Green Party is a young party, both in terms of our development, but also in terms of our membership and in terms of how we present ourselves. I believe myself to be still the youngest parliamentarian leader in these islands. And I think it's about how you present yourself. I think for a start, giving trust in your young people. The party put a trust in me as leader, despite the fact we had academics in the party who were older, more experienced, but they put trust in youth. And I think people have to see themselves reflected. And it is a sad reflection that we have an all-male panel here, but the Green Party is standing 40% female candidates across Northern Ireland, and indeed our sister parties across the UK. So we have put young people and we have put women at the forefront, no less so Caroline Lucas, our MP in England. So I think it is about presentation. It's also about how you communicate, and I think it's trying to keep up to date. And I think there's a danger in politicians ever trying to be cool, or to use the word cool, in fact, and I'm even nervous using it.
Well, you're the only one that has used it. Nobody else has used it.
Absolutely, but I think you do need to keep yourself relevant and keep in
cool,
touch.
you mean, Steve?
And I think the only way to do that is to bring the young people up through your party and let them do that for you.
All right.
I'm getting to the point of being middle-aged, and it will be time for me.
Time to hand over at that point, is it? Okay, Declan Kearney, it's a problem across the board, not just in Northern Ireland, across the world. Perhaps young people aren't engaging in politics.
Yeah, our party has the fastest growing youth organisation on the island. Oh. But in the same way that women, in the same way that women need to be facilitated and promoted in society and in political life, so too must we do the same with young people, in order that the space is created for them to come through with their ideas and with their own vision. But example and message is very important from older members of parties and from indeed all of the parties sitting around the room here this afternoon. And what I hear young people say is, or ask, is what's the vision? What's the big idea? What are we looking towards? And what every party, not just ours, needs to ensure in this election is that young people know that we can translate their aspiration into hope, and that we can take that hope and make something practical of it by ensuring that we create a future which is founded in reconciliation and healing and equality across society.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now and go back to our last question of today's debate.
It's from a woman.
And Bob, the question,
Thank you,
please.
Jim. Well, time is alas beating us. Before we come to that final question, Sarah, who's in the audience, has tweeted and she says, "I've yet to hear one sensible man speak. Maybe we would be better with a few women on those seats."
Are you Sarah? Are you Sarah? That you, Sarah?
We can't dispute that, Bob. We can't dispute that. I think we'd all agree we could do with that.
Let's take our final question then, and it is indeed from me. David Cameron doesn't seem to know which football team he follows. What's your most embarrassing political moment?
You're asking for an admission here. Gregory Campbell,
and if we can take that in a brief answer.
I'm sure there have been some. I've got the feeling. I've got the feeling that it might have been in the Assembly. It's probably a completely obscure moment when I was speaking on a bill and I spoke on a completely different bill that was due to come in an hour's time after I was speaking on the one that I was speaking was due to come.
Did anybody notice?
For about 30 seconds, no. Until one of my colleagues whispered, "You're on the wrong bill." And then it changed.
But you do know what football team you support?
I do, yeah. And I won't change that.
Okay, and it's not
despite how badly they're doing.
Okay, Mark Durkin.
Football team?
Oh, embarrassing moment. You're not getting off that easily.
He's a Man United supporter, so
Man United and County Derry. The most embarrassing political moment was probably did a visit to Scotland along with David Trumbull when he and I were First and Deputy First Minister, and I don't know whether the car that took us up to Edinburgh Castle drove up that hill so fast, but I came out and I just had an absolutely pumping nosebleed, and we were meant to do a photo call with First and Deputy First Minister of Scotland, and it was between tissues and forward, and then it just continued. So that was the most embarrassing. Thankfully it wasn't a local political moment. The only embarrassing moment I had in the Assembly was when Ian Paisley assumed that I had left the chamber briefly during a 6 or 7 hour budget debate to get a drink of water, and I had to say that it was water in the opposite direction, that I'd left the chamber for and nothing else. Just as a point of honesty, I had to declare it.
You had to declare. Okay, well, I'm glad there's honest politicians around on even such intimate issues. Mark Durkin, thank you for that. Jim Allister, have you any admissions for us on embarrassing moments?
Not sure of any admissions. I suppose the most embarrassing thing I find in Stormont is listening to the absolute political, economic nonsense that Sinn Féin comes out with, such as we heard again this morning, that the state should write off everyone's credit card bill. It should write off everyone's mortgage because the state owes us all a living. I just cringe when I hear the economic illiteracy of Sinn Féin laid out before us.
Well, there we are. Jim Allister doesn't have any embarrassing moments of his own, but yours are embarrassing enough for him, Declan Kearney.
Well, listen, if Jim ever gives up acting out as a politician, he can always try and make a career for himself as a second-hand comedian. There's been too many embarrassing moments and too many mistakes made in my life to even try and elevate one above all the rest. The bottom line is, life's a journey. You goes with the rolls and the punches. You makes the mistakes and you takes the embarrassments and you get on with it. I'm a football supporter and a hurling supporter. The best are in Antrim, and the best are particularly from South Antrim.
And you've never forgotten that? You've never forgotten which team?
Oh, absolutely not. Antrim
that would be a big problem.
And the best footballers in Antrim come from South Antrim.
Okay, thank you for that. Mike,
why would he say? I was up a ladder putting up posters in 2011 in Killyleagh and in a high wind, and the poster slipped just as a woman was coming around the corner with her pet dog on a lead, and that was half a second from doing serious injury to that dog. And it was at that moment I realised that decapitating somebody's pet is not a vote winner at election time.
Mike Nesbitt decapitating a pet would not have been a good headline. I think you're right. Stephen Farry.
I suppose on a similar theme, I once had one of my election posters blow off a lamppost, and it was pressed tight against a woman's window in the morning. And showed
Too much information. Too much information.
I think we're talking embarrassing here rather than necessarily scaring people, but are you suggesting that's what happened?
Well,
how did she feel?
Well, we talked to her. I think we got the vote in the end.
Okay. And what about
Liverpool for the record.
Liverpool for the record, okay. David McNally.
Well, in footballing parlance, I'm a Chelsea supporter, so there haven't been too many embarrassing moments for me. Thinking back to the lady referring to the grey-haired males down here, it was some time ago, I've got to say, it was some time ago, as a young canvasser out in East Belfast, and way down the heart of East Belfast where there are all kitchen houses, and I was about 16. I knocked the door with my leaflet all ready, and no answer. I knocked it harder, and this shout came, "Come in!" So what do you do as a 16-year-old? You walk in, straight in, and there was a rather large-sized lady sitting in front of the fire, not a stitch on her, in the bath. And if you ever saw a 16-year-old walking backwards with a leaflet, then you saw me. She then insisted that I come back in and give her whatever in my hand. And I said, all right. And then she said, put it on the mantelpiece, son. And that meant I had to lean over with my eyes shut. So it was very, very embarrassing.
Okay, a baptism of fire into politics for David McNary there. Thank you for that. And Stephen Agnew, what admission have you got for this audience?
It was another assembly moment. Gregory might actually remember, because I think he commented at the time, and I stood up prepared to make my speech. And I have a funny feeling it was quite a heated debate, and I had a nice attack prepared. And I stood up and said, and as a member of the DUP...
No.
It was embarrassing for them. Dream on, Stephen.
But I think I was too far ahead of myself. I planned to go on to lay into the DUP. Alas,
he's on a journey.
As a member. That's a journey I will never go on. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, at least they've shown a sense of humour at the end of it. Just thank you to our panel. But most of all, a special thanks to all of you here who've joined us at the Ulster University Coleraine campus in this marvellous new facility. A special thanks to our hosts today. Special thanks to Dr. Colin Murphy and to Maggie Swarbrick. And to you listening, whether at home or in the car, thanks for joining us for the Q Radio City Beat Election Debate 2015. I'm Jim Fitzpatrick. Good evening.